Hey everyone, welcome back to The Arena. I'm Mike David, joined by Matt Kavachis, and once again a very special guest. If you're new here, welcome to our Arena, a space in which we delve into deep conversations around people's life stories and all things health and wellness. These conversations are deep and are meant to inspire others to tap into their own vulnerabilities. I'll pass it over to Matt shortly to say hello and intro our guest. Before I do, love and appreciation to those who are listening. And if you know anyone who is not listening, do send this conversation their way if you think it could be of value. Over to you, Matt.
What's up? What's up? We got a cool guest here today. This is David Sutcliffe. David is a former actor turned life coach. And I found David, who had the opportunity to interview Andrew Tate, which was just a really, really cool conversation. I didn't get to the end of it, and I've now been told that the best part's at the end, so I know what I'm going to be doing after this. But David, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we start with this? Who is David Sutcliffe?
Who am I? Professionally, I'm a core energetics practitioner. Core energetics is a somatic psychotherapy. So I was an actor for a long time in Hollywood. I had a good run, and a lot of people know me from the TV show Gilmore Girls. But eventually, I transitioned into this therapy. I kind of fell in love with it. Found it very powerful and cathartic and interesting, and particularly doing it in groups. That's what I was drawn to, this group therapy. And there was nothing like it. And I always had an interest in psychology. Acting itself is an exploration into psychology. And then once I went to a training program, graduated, I was still working in Hollywood, and eventually just made the transition to doing this full time. So now this is what I'm doing. I have a private practice. I lead workshops. I do online trainings, and I also occasionally interview people online from a kind of psychological point of view, almost like an online therapy session.
And so what do we need to kind of better understand about your childhood in order to, or what do we need to know about your childhood in order to better understand kind of who you are today, how that shaped you?
That's a big question. I could talk about that for hours. I mean, that's really all I'm thinking about all day long. Not so much with me, but with my clients. I mean, that's really what my training was all about, is trying to unpack my childhood and discover what happened, how it influenced my thinking and my orientation to life, and how I was making it manifest in the world. And that's really how I work with my clients. My parents split when I was 6, so that was really the first defining incident in my life. And then my mother remarried, and then they split when I was about 18. And so there's a lot to unpack there, but certainly relationships for me equaled pain. Didn't trust them, didn't trust intimacy. And my life was very chaotic and unpredictable. There wasn't a lot of stability, which makes sense why I would choose a career as an actor, because a lot of instability in that career. But I was used to it. I mean, there's always a light and a shadow to things, and I could tolerate that level of uncertainty and still can. So I think an absent father is a painful thing. I think a lot of people can relate to that. I didn't really understand what it meant to be a man. I was really defined by my relationship with my mother. And like a lot of sons, particularly firstborn sons, when their parents split and their dad is not around, they, in some sense, become the de facto man. And there is a instinct to want to kind of take care of your mother. And so I spent a lot of my life in that rescuer role with women, feeling like if I wasn't taking care of them, I was doing something wrong. But of course, bottling up my own needs, and ended up experiencing a lot of resentment. So relationships for me felt like traps, and I avoided them for most of my life. That's really been the predominant struggle of my life, relationships. and which was, interesting because I was in Hollywood. I was a kind of a heartthrob, so I had lots of opportunities with women, but relationships were not. And I wanted a relationship. I wasn't really a playboy, but I could never make them work. And it's one of the reasons that I went deep into the work that I do, because I really wanted to get to the root of why.
Well, yeah, I mean, great question, Matt, because now I feel like we have everything we have to talk about. There's so much there. I guess it seems like relationships is something we'll get to. One of the things that jumped out to me was talking about your upbringing in chaos. There, thus translated to a lifestyle where you almost felt comfortable in chaos. And curious if, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the podcast, The Diary of a CEO with, Stephen Bartlett. Watched an episode of him where he talks about an addiction to stress. Curious if that's something that resonates with you, or if that's something similar, or, since you've done your own reflections in your life, if that is something that you have an experience with, which is like all you know is chaos and so you almost are attracted to it. What more can people learn from that experience from somebody as knowledgeable as you are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I do know that podcast, and I don't know if I was addicted to stress exactly, but certainly ran away from safety or real connection or love or groundedness because it was unfamiliar and it didn't feel safe, or I couldn't trust it. And so what we all do is unconsciously recreate the circumstances of our childhood. Maybe not exactly the dynamic, but there's something about in the quality of it. And so for me, I dated women that I ultimately couldn't trust, and to confirm my belief that I couldn't trust women. And that was a pattern that, went on and on and on. And they were good women, but it was a setup. And it was the same in my career. I was really reluctant to sign a long-term contract with a series. I did a lot of reoccurring roles, and I asked myself why. Why won't you just sign on to a series? But there was something about the idea of signing a 7-year contract that, again, I felt bound by it. I felt like I was going to be trapped. That didn't feel safe to me. What felt safe was this really illusion of freedom, where I had all kinds of options available to me. But of course, too many options is its own prison. And ultimately, I resolved all that and came to terms with it. But I think everybody can relate to what it is you're suggesting, is that somehow we are recreating the past, and it's hard for me to relax or settle or let down, let go. All of those things, I have to effort to do it. I have to practice it. It's not something that comes naturally for me. I mean, obviously I've done a lot of work. I'm aware of it now. But if I'm not proactive in it, it's easy for me to spin into a kind of survival mode and then rationalize it. Like, oh, this is just what life is, or I'm really busy right now. So I have to consciously set up my life in a way, put things on the schedule, let my wife know, that I have this predilection, and so that she can see it and maybe call me on it, because often we need reflection from other people when we get lost in our shit. But all of that to mitigate against these unconscious tendencies that I have, because when stress hits, they take over.
And so I guess, like, the rational mind would say, you've been surrounded by chaos for as long as you have, like, shouldn't you go and seek the palm trees and the calmness? But what I'm hearing sounds a lot like you feel uneasy, or at points in your life, I don't know where you're at today, but like you have felt uneasy in this sort of sentiment of like, it's hard to trust this. And so you resort to something that you are more familiarized. Is that?
That's all of us, yeah. We tend towards what's familiar. And so there wasn't a lot of safety in my childhood. There wasn't ease. My life was, the rug was pulled out from under me a number of times. So why would I trust that things are going to be okay? A relationship is going to be okay. It's constant chaos. It's constant scarcity. It's constant survival. That's what I know. That's how my nervous system is wired. And there's a lot of benefit to that, right? Like you get used to living on the edge. You get used to tolerating the unknown. You get used to being in the chaos and being okay with it, where other people cannot. So your ego, with like all things, it will take what's there and turn it into a virtue. And all of that is good on one level. The problem is when it's compulsive, when you're doing it unconsciously. And so yeah, for me, I couldn't relax. My nervous system wouldn't allow it, and my brain would rationalize that. And so, like I said, I have to be intentional about it. I remember the moment where I started scheduling massages once a week, which to me it sounds like, oh, okay, sure, why not? But at the time, that seemed so fucking absurd to me, that I'm gonna go get a massage once a week. Who the fuck gets a massage once a week? Like, I had so much judgment about it. Like it was for fucking pussies or women or something. Like that was how I saw it in my mind. But it was like an alcoholic. Like you can't go into a bar. You got to go to your meeting every day. It was like I had to schedule it so that I had 1 week and where I had to show up and do this thing so that I could relax. And that changed me. I started to see the value and the benefit of it. So, but these things don't go away, right? That's. I mean, I'm sure you talk to a lot of people, but what I've come to is it's the awareness. There's healing. Healing is real, and you can change. But the things that get implanted in us, the woundings, the trauma, the nervous system adaptations, I don't think they're ever fully healed, right? I think we learn to work with them. We learn to manage them. Just like a football player has a knee injury, he's got to do whatever he's got to do before the game. He still play football, but he's got to take care of it, right? He's got to be mindful about that. And I think the same is true for our emotional wounds.
And I think it reminds me of the saying, your nervous system will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven, in terms of kind of what you said. And when you talk about that massage and how that positively impacted you, it just makes me, for whatever reason, think of someone else that could benefit from that, which is the guy you interviewed, Andrew Tate. With that, how do you work with people in your personal experience, or friends, whomever, where you see how it could be beneficial to them, but maybe from their perspective, they don't see a reason to change? Everything they're doing is working for them. Like, how do you help bridge that gap for people without maybe making them defensive or turned off by the idea?
It's impossible, to be honest. Like, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink, right? They have to make the decision themselves. People like Andrew, and a lot of successful people who are powerful, let's say, they tend to not go to therapy because why would they? They're successful, right? They're killing it by the standards that are set in the world that we live in, this society we live in. So, like in that conversation with Andrew, I mean, he starts off skeptical. That's his whole shtick, right? I don't believe in psychotherapy. Therapy's bullshit. But, there's a contradiction in that. It's like, well, why are you sitting down with me then? There must be something that you think that I know that you don't know about you. And there's some part of your brain that's actually curious, and there's a humility there. But at the end of the day, is somebody like Andrew going to really dig into the deepest recesses of his psyche to remake his life? I don't know. I don't think so. It's usually when people seek help, it's because something in their life is really not working, that they have these deep self-destructive patterns, and whether it's in the relationship or the career. So people who are doing well again, at least by the standards that society sets, it's very hard to get them to come to therapy. Now, if you're in relationship with somebody like that, you have to be extremely patient with them. You can't push. The reason that they're like that is because, and I'm going to make a generalization here, there's a lot of reasons that people are the way they are, but let's just say whenever anybody is that defended or in an intense state of rationalizing everything, or it has an intense drive to succeed at all costs, there's some deep pain that's there that they're protecting. And that behavior is what allows them to feel safe. And so what you're asking them to do is give up the thing that has created not only safety for them, but has is at the center of their self-esteem. And I had that. I went to Hollywood, was successful, and had everything that I wanted, and but also this deep feeling of emptiness. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I sought it out, but nobody, if I didn't seek it out, could help me. I wouldn't allow it.
So, I'm in sales, and I always talk about it's hard to sell an ice pack to somebody who, doesn't have a bruise, or isn't feeling the pain of a bruise. And so, so much of what sales tactics would insinuate is that you have to, poke the bruise, or you have to problem illuminate. And I think Matt and I, as we've had these conversations, and he's gone through his healing journey tied to therapy, he can't fathom for the life of him, or I'm speaking for him right now, but like this whole idea of like, why wouldn't you want to feel better? And what I'm hearing is that they don't know what they're feeling, or I'm just trying to make sense of like this hyper-rationalized person. Is it that they're blocking their ability to feel? Is it that their mind is disallowing them to tap into these parts of them that are quote unquote wounded or suffering? Is it like a lack of like conscious awareness of their feelings that is blocking themselves from feeling the type of pain that would otherwise signal to them, hey, I need to repair this? Because if they were actually feeling the level of pain that comes with things like depression or, not having emotional needs met and these deep traumatic wounds, it would make less sense that they wouldn't go and seek the help or go and seek a healing journey. It feels like at times these people are not even open to the idea of it. So it tells me that they're not even feeling everything that we're describing in terms of pain. How is that possible?
Well, we're talking about two specific kind of character structures right now. And in the Reichian model, we would call it the rigid character structure and the psychopathic character structures. Psychopathic is kind of narcissist, okay? And they're very reluctant to go to therapy, again, because usually they're extremely successful. Those are the two patterns that do very, very well in the world, because the rigids are systems people, and their whole fixation is on being successful, and they're very, very good at it. Psychopaths are driven by an unconscious desire to be something other than what they are. They have to be bigger than who they actually are. They had to be bigger than who they were for their parents. Like, it wasn't enough to just be them. They had to be special. They had to be amazing, right? So their whole identity is rooted in that, and they're getting so much approbation from the culture for their success and for their charisma and the things that they're doing and creating. Their ego has to take a real hit. Like, something has to happen. It usually takes a tragedy for these kind of people. Now, I work with these people all the time, and I don't have a hard time actually working with them, because I have that pattern, both of those patterns. Like, so I relate to it, so I know like the way in. And what I can tell you is that you have to be, they're fragile, in that way. Like, they're very delicate, and it's hard to see them that way because they project so much power very often. But if you look at, the people who are most successful in the culture, like particularly the famous people, like they're almost all psychopathic in a sense, right? Whether it's politicians or actors or CEOs, they have that quality. And I don't know on a bigger picture if they're meant to be healed. I wonder sometimes when I think about Andrew, I sat across from him for a couple hours and I got a good feel for him. And does he have issues? Yeah, of course he's got fucking issues. He knows that. But there's some vibe that I got at the end of it. It's like I don't think he's supposed to be in therapy. I don't think that's what he's here to do. I think he's got some kind of karma, and actually his trauma that is causing him to act out in this way is in service of something, and it's at cost to him more than anybody, but it's a cost he seems willing to pay, right? So I don't think, you have to let people come to you, right? Like you have to let them do their thing and to trust that there's something bigger happening and that we're on such a massive timeline in terms of, the evolutionary process. Like we have these moments where it's like, oh, we have to heal, but maybe Andrew's, great grandson will be the one to finally go to therapy, and maybe that'll be perfect. Like maybe that's when it needed to happen. So I mean that's what I've come to, because of course when I started this journey I'm like, everybody's got to go to fucking therapy, and obviously a lot of people looked at me like I don't want to go to fucking therapy. It's like, yeah, but there's shit about yourself that you don't know. And they're like, yeah, probably. And yeah, you're probably right. I could probably use it, and they didn't go. And you know what? They're fine. It's fine. Are they living in a delusion? Yeah, in some way. Are they happy? Yeah. Could they be happier? Maybe. But also you want to unpack all that shit. Like what I did. I went in for fucking 15 years. That's not for everyone. I'm still in it, right? And it's like, that's no, what's the reward on the other side? I have a deep, much more elevated sense of my own consciousness, but it was fucking painful and it was hard. And all the way along, I wondered about the cost of it. And so I would fantasize about, I should have never left Hollywood. I just got some job and some fucking TV show and married some big-titted actress and everything would have been fine. And now I'm like, got my face in the sand and I'm crying my eyes out, getting to the root of my feeling. Like, why am I doing this? But I felt compelled, right? For me, there was no other choice. But that's not the way it is for everybody. And I've learned to respect that.
I think that's very well said. And I was going to say, I feel the same thing. I mean, I'm 2.5 years into what's been a very painfully beautiful journey of self-healing, of healing and continuing to do that work. But I personally, I'm like you. I have this just desire, this urge to seek truth about myself, the deepest layers of who I am at my core. And I could never, after kind of starting to go down that route, as painful as it can be, I can never do it any other way. Like my North Star is one of truth and love, and that's where I'm going to go, no matter how painful that might be at times. Because on the other side of that, at least for me, is a deep sense of inner peace.
Yeah, well,
joy.
if you see that we're all connected, that we're all one thing, that human beings are all one, it's one organism. Okay, you don't need 100% of them going on ayahuasca journeys, right? Doing the deep work. Like you only need a small group to be doing that, to help elevate the consciousness. Just like you don't need everybody to be a doctor or a mechanic, right? Like it has to get spread out. So I think there is a small group of people, and I realized at a certain point, I guess I'm one of them. I guess this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm into. I didn't think that thought. It was reflected back to me over and over again. And I thought, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just playing my part here. There's nothing special to it. This is what I'm into, just like somebody else is into painting or racing cars, like whatever. This is what I'm into, and this is what I like to do. And it is of service to myself. It's of service to my family, my community, but it's a service to the whole on some level. Like I really believe, like if we're all connected on some kind of psycho-spiritual level, when my consciousness elevates, when I have an awakening, it goes out somewhere in the fabric of the field, and it helps somebody else wake up, right? Somewhere, something. And so, we do the work for ourselves, but we do it for everybody. And in some way, it's just like, this is what I like to do.
Totally. You mentioned, talking about Hollywood, what is it like to feel, from externally, you've made it, you've got it all, people are aspiring to be David Sutcliffe, yet internally you couldn't maybe feel more different, and I think you mentioned feeling empty inside. What's it like to just be sitting in that place?
It's scary because you wonder why. Like, what's wrong with me? What else could I think? Like, I got what I wanted and I'm not happy. What the fuck is wrong with me? It didn't make any sense. I remember sitting on the set of Friends. I got a small part on Friends, like the guest star of the week kind of thing. And it was at the beginning of my career, but I'd already had a little bit of success. So I had some confidence, and I knew that I was on a trajectory. But if I got to the highest echelon of the path that I was on, it would have been something like Friends, okay? So now I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, these fucking people are making $750,000 a week, right? At the time, it was episode 150, and they're all very nice, and it was great. This is a kind of institutional show, and I had this overwhelming feeling like I don't want this, and it scared me because I was like, why wouldn't you want this? Look at what these guys have. Like, they have everything, and they have lots of money and success and power, and this is the dream. This is the game you're playing, bro. Like, this is the environment you're in. It's like, this is your Super Bowl, and you're saying you don't want to win the Super Bowl. It was fucking scary. I didn't know what was going on. I thought maybe I have some, fear of success or afraid of what it is. And it took me a long time to really see that, like, this is not my path. And then I had to get out of it. And it's a hard thing to get out of because you're so rooted inside it, because so many people want to be actors. They go to Hollywood, they dream of being an actor. They don't go, but everybody's got a fantasy of being an actor, and you actually are doing it, and it's a big deal. And so then to walk away from it seems insane. And a lot of people, I think, thought that I was insane, that I had joined a cult or something. But I'll tell you, when I finally did leave, which was hard, as I said, and it took a lot of years to really, reconcile to it internally. I went back to a party. It was an Emmy party, and saw a lot of people that I knew, famous people, some like extremely famous people. And they're, hey, where you been? I was like, oh, I'm out, man. I quit, and then I told them what I was doing. And every single person I talked to looked at me like they were in this like amazement, and they all said the same thing: "You got out. Like, good for you." And I was so shocked. I was like, "What do you like?" Because I expected them to judge me. Oh, you couldn't hack it, you couldn't make it. I don't know. But I realized in that moment, especially the people who were, because I was a little bit famous, but I wasn't famous enough that I felt like fully trapped. But once you're really famous, like, a lot of people know your name, there's no getting out. What are you going to do? Go work at McDonald's? It's just, you can't do anything else. Like, you're trapped in this thing. And I realized, like, it took a lot of balls to fucking get out of this. And I was pretty good at it. Like, I could have had I could have kept working, could have had a career all the way to the end, But so in retrospect, I thought I was going crazy, but now I look back on it, getting out it's one of the things that I'm most proud of.
So if we go back to that version of David that's sitting there in that Friends set, in that moment where you said it's scary, you're wondering why, and it doesn't make sense to you then, if you were to go back to that person and try to explain it to them today, why, how would you summarize that answer in a way that would land with this person?
I wouldn't. I just look at him and say, this fucking guy's got to go through it and figure it out.
I realized as I was asking
There's
that.
nothing you can say, man. Like, it's like maybe if he looked to me and was like, I didn't really let that thought be, I barely let that thought be known to my own mind. Never mind tell somebody else about it, right? Now, had he said, I had this experience, this is what happened, I might just say, well, maybe that's not what you want. And maybe that's okay. And maybe there's something else you want. And I would encourage you to let yourself have whatever that is, and whatever images you have about what things are supposed to look like. I would encourage you to let go of that and just let your mind wander. Your life can be anything that you want it to be. There's no restriction, and just sort of encourage that kind of thinking. But at the same time, knowing that we all have to go through what we have to go through. I mean, I got married late for all the reasons that I described, earlier. But the woman that I was dating before I got married, a couple years before I ended up meeting my wife, I mean, she was great, but it was hell. And when I met her, it was like I saw her and I was like, I'm not supposed to be with this. I should stay the fuck away from her. But I couldn't stop myself. Like, I was compelled, and I knew somewhere in my psyche, I was like, I have to go all the way into what this is and feel everything and let myself crash and burn and come out the other side. I just had that intuition. And that's exactly what happened. And it was, I'm very grateful to her in some way. But it was unbelievably painful and excruciatingly scary, and for reasons that I won't necessarily get into. But had I not gone through that, I would never have been prepared to meet my wife. So sometimes you just got to let people make their mistakes, and we have to let ourselves make our own mistakes. We don't want to repeat them over and over again, obviously, but sometimes we have to go through it. And then when I look back at all the shit that I went through, I mean, you guys are younger than me. I'm 55, and it's like, I've made a shitload of mistakes and had all this insanity. But when I look back at it now, it's like, would I give any of that up? Would I want it not to have happened? I don't think so. It's just all part of my story. And it's in its own way, it's all beautiful.
And so you've mentioned trust as being, an issue, a struggle, challenge growing up. I mean, how have you learned and started to trust? I mean, starting with yourself, but also other people. Like, what does that process look like as someone that had every reason to believe, like you said, that people are untrustworthy?
I really realized the extent of this issue when I was in an ayahuasca ceremony in Joshua Tree, and the medicine came on, and I started to freak the fuck out. I'd been to about 5 or 6 ceremonies at this point, so I had a little bit of experience, but like, for whatever reason, it hit me in a way that I got really, really scared. And I looked around the room, and I had 2 people that I knew in the room, 2 people that I came with, right? So I should have trusted them, but the feeling inside me was like, I can't fucking trust anybody here. And it was terrifying, because I felt like I was on the verge of losing control and that I needed help. And I remember thinking, like, okay, I don't trust anybody here, but I'm in terror. What do I do? And the thought was, well, you're just going to have to choose to trust. And what other way out is there? You know what I mean? Like, there's no other way out. So I was like, fuck, okay. And then I made the choice. I was like, all right. You know what? I'm going to fucking trust that if something happens, somebody's going to take care of me. Everything's going to be okay. And as soon as I made that choice and relaxed into it, like, all my fear went away. And all the resistance that I was having to the medicine coming on, it all went away. And it just suddenly, I felt light and connected. And then I went and laid down on the healing mat, and all these people came over and they put their hands on me, and I started crying. And I had this incredibly healing experience. So the answer to your question is, you have to choose. There's no other way. You have to know unconsciously that you don't trust. Like, you first have to make that conscious, because if a lot of people don't really know that they don't trust, right? And also that it's more than that. It's like, I won't trust. I'll never fucking trust. Like, there's a lower self aspect that has made a decision to never trust again. And if you're not trusting other people, you're not trusting life, you're actually not trusting yourself, you're not trusting God, you're separate, you're isolated, you're alone. There's no way out of separation if you don't learn to trust. And so I just started making the choice. It's like, okay, I'm going to trust. I try to be discerning, obviously, and trust my intuition. But, it's like getting married. It's like, it's a leap of faith. And so, but you take those leaps of faith over and over again, and then you do start to trust, and then you start to trust yourself. And then you realize that, well, you know what? If I trust and I make a mistake and I get betrayed or something bad happens, I'll be fine. Like, it's not the end of the world. Like, it'll be okay. The child who was betrayed doesn't feel that way. It's life or death to the child. So we have to kind of remember that we have that distortion somewhere in our psyche from our childhood. But the adult can tolerate an extreme betrayal and be okay, feel the pain, but trust again.
Is there a parallel around your life now and your life as an actor? Because one of the things that really jumped out to me was how people looked at you and said, you got out. And is there something like poetic or metaphorical about the acting space in which you noticed you've been in that space and like you've been close to those people around there? Like, were there common trends, or was there pattern recognition and things that you saw in people that were in these acting careers, and how maybe that was pulling them away from truth and a lot of what you had to go through to get to where you're at today? Have you reflected on that at all? And is there anything that you can impart on us from your experience there?
Well, I think, first let me just say I have a lot of respect for actors. I mean, it takes a lot of balls to go out to Hollywood and try to make it. I mean, and everybody thinks you're fucking nuts and you're chasing this pipe dream. And those who make it, they deserve it, right? And the way they put themselves out there, the vulnerability of it, like, they took a big risk. And so I have nothing but respect for actors. That said, you probably remember that show, or maybe you don't, Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton. He made the point that I think he said 95% of the actors that sat across from him during the interviews were from broken homes, which I found really interesting. And it made sense to me. Obviously, I was from a broken home. And, I realized that most of the people that I knew in Hollywood their parents were split up. So that tells you something. Actors are generally kind of dysfunctional. And what is it about wanting to be an actor? Like, what's the unconscious motivation? Well, the conscious motivation is, they're creative people, right? They want to express themselves. They want to dive into a character, and it's fun for them, right? It's an aspect of their creativity. But the unconscious shadow part is probably like, I want to be seen. I didn't feel seen as a child, and if I go become an actor, people are going to look at me, they're going to see me, and then I'm going to finally feel appreciated or loved, ultimately, in the way that I wanted but wasn't as a child. And so there is some, I think, for all actors, like, we're chasing love, like, we want to be loved, and we think if we can become famous, or successful that we'll be loved. And of course, that's not the case. I mean, nobody talks about this better than Ben Affleck. He's constantly talking about how shitty it is to be famous. And he just really nothing changes. It's like all my shit. It just makes it worse. Being famous sucks. And I think he's right. I mean, my experiences in Hollywood, I don't really have anything bad to say about it. I met a lot of amazing people, had a lot of amazing opportunities, and working with people at a very high level. It's like being in the big leagues, right? Like you're on the same field as Derek Jeter. It's like, fuck, man, that guy really can fucking hit a baseball. It's so you're acting opposite somebody like Matthew Modine, and you're just like, holy fuck, like these people can roll. Like there's a reason that he was a movie star, and having experiences like that were really, really exciting for me. So I have nothing but gratitude. But yeah, there's a lot of neurotic folks in Hollywood that are looking for love.
Man, that's so mind-blowing to me, because from the outside looking into the space, like I think a lot of our perception is that it's the fame in Hollywood that breaks people and has them spiral into, drug addictions, depression, and all the things that actors, might struggle with. Again, generalizing broadly. And you just make a point now that just gives me a whole new perspective, which is they're likely entering in with pieces of them already broken, and then they've just never had an opportunity to actually heal. It's not Hollywood that broke them. It's maybe Hollywood or this lifestyle of the fame
and the thing that
pulls them further and further away from a more proper healing
Ben
journey.
Affleck walks
I think it
in the room.
amplifies the problem.
Nobody
too.
sees Ben Affleck. They don't know Ben Affleck. They have an image of Ben Affleck in their mind because they've seen him in movies or on interviews, and they imagine what it's like to be famous and rich like that. So when they see him, it's just a mass projection onto him. And then in conversation, it's like, you can't really be with that guy. You can't really, like, hey man, like the way you would meet, your wife's friend's husband. You're just like, what's up, brother? And you're just talking to him. It's fucking Ben Affleck, right? So they're isolated. They're completely separate from fucking everybody in the world. And I think it's very alienating. And the only people they can talk to are other actors who are famous like them, and they're just as fucking crazy for the most part. And then everybody around them also wants something from them. Their agents, their managers, their lawyers, because they're big. They make people a lot of money. And so they can't trust anybody or anything. And it's like it takes a very special kind of person to be able to navigate that space, and not fall prey to it, and be able to hold on to themselves in the face of all that projection and distrust. And that's why the people who do it get through it relatively unscathed. I have a lot of admiration for. I don't know how, but I wasn't able to. But it's I think they come in broken, and then the whole dynamic puts so much pressure on them that it's almost inevitable that they crack in some way.
Well, I think you said one thing in terms of why people become actors, and the second piece you said was they want to be seen. And I really feel that on a personal level. I think about myself, and for whatever reason, I've always envisioned myself being an actor or doing something. And as I've stepped into a more authentic version of myself, last year I started doing comedy improv. Mm-hmm. Just felt something I wanted to do, and I really enjoyed it. It was terrifying, but I loved being on stage, and now I'm a public speaker, and I'm speaking, and my coach at the time said to me, she said,
they
"You're
only
practicing
understand
being seen."
themselves through
And
the
I was
reflection
like,
of their environment,
wow,
primarily their parents. They don't know
really
who the fuck
resonates.
they are,
I guess
right?
I'd just love to hear your reaction
If they
on that.
only
But that
understand
really,
themselves
that second piece
by
really resonates
how
with me personally.
their parents reflect them back to them. which is why children are always saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, daddy, look at me, mommy, look at me, look at me doing this, look at my picture, look at the. They need that. They have to be seen. They have to be attuned to, so they can feel who it is they are. And if they don't get that in the way that they need, that tend to be very ungrounded and probably conclude, what else could they conclude, that there's something wrong with them, right? Or they because they were disowned in some way, or at least some aspect of themselves, right? And so not being seen is extraordinarily painful. And parents can even have the best of intentions and not see their children, right? If a parent is a certain way, they're not, let's say they're not creative types, it's a math, logic, materialist type, but their child is like hyper creative and lives in, their own world. The parent may not be able to see them just because they can't comprehend it. And so they're naturally going to want to orient them towards something that they feel safer with. And so I think all of us, nobody gets seen perfectly as a child, right? And nobody's held perfectly in all the aspects of who we are. So all of us have aspects of who we are that are disowned, shamed, relegated to the unconscious, and part of the journey that you're on is like bringing those aspects of ourself back. So maybe there's whatever your fears were around public speaking or being seen, like if the world sees this part of me, there must have been some image that something bad is going to fucking happen, right? Like it's not going to be good. Like I'm going to get humiliated generally is the feeling. And if I'm humiliated, well, then it's kind of a fate worse than death, really. Of course, that's not true. And I think what you're doing is what everybody should be doing, which is just putting yourself out there as much as you can. And what you realize very quickly is that nobody fucking cares. Everybody's in their own world. And you can if you do bomb, you go up and bomb and you'll be fine. Like you'll get over it. And maybe you feel like shit for a day, but if you just get back on the horse, like you'll be fine. And it.
So to wrap this up, David, first of all, thank you for your time. This was an incredible conversation. I've got one last question for you, which we ask all our guests. What in your life are you most proud of? What an answer, man. That's very well
Yeah,
said.
that's one of my favorites. I'll throw that out there.
Yeah,
the
trust your
commitment
intuition.
to your intuition. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super powerful. David, thank you so much.